shit. You back to me.
Can you imagine the cost of Hollywood's fame? Lies here the harrowing tale of 20 Hollywood elite whose lives were consumed by alcohol and drug addiction. Let's find out.
We're out to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
Number 20. Judy Garland. That's the infamous Judy Garland Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. Judy Garland's journey to stardom began in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. From age 4, she was already stealing hearts with her performances. But it was at 13 when her life trajectory took a severe turn. In 1926, when Judy's family moved to California, MGM, the Hollywood giant, scooped Judy up after witnessing her potential. But the early days of MGM led her to live a life from which she never recovered. To fit in the profitable box office image, Judy found herself taking a toxic cocktail of drugs. Later on, Judy, a movie based on the real life of Garland, revealed secrets about the studio system that were terrifying. Garland, like many other young stars of her time, was fed amphetamines to keep her going during grueling shoots. And if you think that was all, you're wrong. She was also fed barbiturates to help her sleep and cope with stress. Despite her iconic role as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, Garland's personal struggles dominated much of her career. By the end of it, she was not only battling addiction and health issues, but also the weight of her fame. In 1968, Judy, at the mere age of 47, passed away due to an accidental overdose of barbiturates. Years later, Ann Peterson, the author of Scandals of Classic Hollywood, wrote, "Garland was the first public victim of stardom, and certainly not the last." And she was right.
Holy Crusades.
I'll condemn anything that leaves the task of holding England for Richard to outlaws like me.
Number 19. Errol Flynn. The handsome and charming Errol Flynn was the epitome of Hollywood's golden era. Throughout the 1930s and 40s, he was at the center of all the swashbuckling adventures. Becoming well known for Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood, Flynn was the ultimate movie star. But he had a major flaw that ultimately led to his downfall. Can you take a guess? Yes, Errol Flynn couldn't keep his vices under control. Flynn's personal life became just as legendary as his on-screen performances. In fact, by the 1940s, Flynn had become notoriously famous for alcohol abuse and sex scandals. You wouldn't believe the extent of his addiction. During the filming of Robin Hood, Flynn used to shoot syringes of alcohol into oranges to stay intoxicated. So, the studio executives started distancing themselves from him. But when his drinking cost him a long professional relationship with Raoul Walsh, it was almost over for this budding actor. Walsh was a director Flynn had worked with since the early 1940s. As it would have gone, Flynn's habits finally caught up with him. By the 1950s, he was a far cry from his glory days. A once the second highest paid actor in Hollywood was now broke, struggling to keep up with his once thriving career. He could never make a comeback again. Sadly, on October 14, 1959, at the age of 50, Errol Flynn passed away due to a heart attack.
Were appalled by his disheveled and, quote, bloated appearance. The coroner who did his autopsy later recounted that the movie star looked far older than 50.
Just like Errol, the next actor on the list was as charismatic as he was troubled.
Concept of, drug, sex, and rock and roll.
Well, it is, it's been, but we're getting older.
Yeah.
Number 18. Jan Michael Vincent. Known for his electric blue eyes and a surfer's build, Jan Michael Vincent was a born star. In the late 60s, Jan's acting journey took off with roles in TV classics like Bonanza and Gunsmoke. But it was his role as Stringfellow Hawk in Airwolf that put him on the map. Airwolf was pure 80s TV gold, and Michael was at the center of it. By the end of it, Jan Michael was making $200,000 per episode. Not too bad, right? Yet Vincent's habit of finding trouble with alcohol and cocaine had him derailing his career. At one point, he had to take a time out in rehab to avoid doing jail time, and that marked the end of Airwolf. From there, Jan's career took a hit. Even with doing TV movies like Alienator and Deadly Heroes, Vincent never saw the face of success again. With worsening substance abuse came an accident that nearly ended his life in 1996. He broke his neck and damaged his vocal cords. After that, Jan Michael completely vanished from the Hollywood scene. On February 10, 2019, Jan Michael Vincent passed away at the age of 73. Number 17. Dorothy Dandridge. Ever wondered who broke Hollywood's blonde bombshell stereotype and paved the way for diversity on the big screen? It was Dorothy Dandridge, and that's exactly what makes this story more tragic. Hailed as the first black movie star, Dorothy Dandridge was the picture of success. With an image of confidence and allure, Dorothy captured audiences on screen. She became the first black woman to be nominated for Best Actress Oscar. Yet behind the scenes, her life was far from perfect. It was riddled with personal tragedies and harsh bigotry of the film industry. And it was only about time when all of these led her to turn to drugs. In the early 1930s, Dorothy and her family moved to Los Angeles. It was there she and her sisters, known as the Dandridge sisters, set out to conquer Hollywood. By the age of 15, Dorothy had already made her film debut alongside the Marx Brothers in A Day at the Races. However, despite her early success, Dorothy struggled with live performances, and her anxiety was exacerbated by the demands of male patrons at nightclubs. Despite her talent and acclaim, Dorothy found herself boxed in by Hollywood's narrow perceptions of black women. Her only escape was her prescribed medicines. Now, there was no turning back for her. Still, at 42, it looked like she'd make a comeback. But something terrible happened on the day of a planned performance in New York City. On September 8, 1965, Dandridge passed away because of a fatal overdose of her sedative medication.
Toxicology testing concluded that she had actually overdosed on an antidepressant, as the New York Times reported. This caused speculation that Dandridge had committed suicide.
You don't look like a burglar.
Thanks.
Number 16. Diana Barrymore. Diana was destined for stardom. After all, she had Hollywood royalty as her father and a talented poet and actress as her mother. But as her story will tell, she had other plans. Born on March 3, 1921, Diana Barrymore made her way to Hollywood even before she was 21. However, despite her family connections, her film career struggled to take off. She only had a handful of forgettable roles to her name. One missed opportunity came in 1938. Diana was considered for the iconic role of Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. But her career fizzled out quickly. The reason was odd. She didn't want to work with comedy duo Abbott and Costello. So she returned to stage acting. But Diana's personal demons, yes, alcohol dependency and erratic behavior, continued to haunt her. And it was by 1955 that her life was in shambles. And all of her struggles culminated in a life-ending attempt while on tour in Boston. But then, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. Or it looked like that. In 1957, Diana's story took a turn with the release of her autobiography, Too Much Too Soon. The book's success led to a Hollywood adaptation. This gave Diana's career a much-needed boost. However, her newfound sobriety didn't last long. Just weeks before her death, Diana relapsed at a Christmas party. She succumbed to heavy drinking and barbiturates to ease her troubles. Then there was only a downward spiral to follow. On January 25, 1960, Diana Barrymore was found lifeless in her Manhattan apartment, aged only 38. As expected, a toxicology report later confirmed the cause of her death. It was a lethal combination of alcohol and barbiturates. However, the next story might be the most tragic of all in Hollywood's history. Do you remember the little charming kid, John Connor, in Terminator 2? Well, if you are wondering where he is now, we have some news for you.
I didn't really decide. I just got discovered for Terminator 2. I was hanging out.
Number 15. Edward Furlong. Let's journey back to 1999. A young Edward Furlong was on the brink of Hollywood stardom. Terminator 2, Judgment Day, was about to hit theaters. Furlong's portrayal of a brave John Connor had critics singing his praises. From the looks of it, Furlong was on his way to the big leagues. But behind the scenes, Furlong's life was anything but glamorous. Edward was raised in LA without a father figure, so his upbringing was untypical. By the time he was in his early teens, he had won emancipation from his guardians. Pretty wild, right? But wilder things happened when he was 15. At just 15, Furlong found himself in a relationship with his 29-year-old on-set tutor from Terminator 2. She went on to become his manager, but her guidance wasn't what we can call the best. Now, Furlong was already deep into the notorious nightlife of Hollywood. He was addicted to every kind of drug there was. It didn't help that despite a promising start, Furlong's career had also hit rough waters. Critical and commercial flops had taken over his early success. Battles with addiction, including heroin and cocaine, and struggles with alcoholism stuck with him throughout the years. Still, there were glimmers of hope. He had us believing he could make a comeback when his role in American History X earned him critical acclaim. Yet the highs were short-lived. Furlong's addictions cost him the chance to reprise his role as John Connor in the Terminator sequel. And there was no turning back from this failure. The 2000s brought tons of legal troubles, including arrests for domestic abuse and alcoholism. And then you can guess what happened. Furlong found himself broke and broken. As of now, Furlong is now committed to sobriety. But it makes you wonder, can he ever make a comeback? Only time can tell.
It's like money, isn't it?
Very similar.
I'm so pleased Dorothy's taken an interest in you. I mean,
For 14, Marilyn Monroe. A legend, a star, and the entire Hollywood industry. Marilyn Monroe is an embodiment of all, even the terrible parts of it. Born on June 1, 1926, in the city of Los Angeles, Marilyn Monroe spent much of her life in foster care. So, her path to stardom was nothing short of remarkable. Over the next 2 decades, she skyrocketed to fame to become the epitome of Hollywood glamour. By the 1950s, her films, like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, were making a modern equivalent of around $2 billion. Marilyn's fervent dream of fame and fortune had come true. She had married Arthur Miller, the legendary playwright. She was friends with Frank Sinatra. How can we forget her infamous affair with the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy? Monroe had got it all. However, the shadows of her past haunted her still. Battling with anxiety and depression, she turned to drugs and alcohol. As is always the case, Monroe's personal struggles spilled over into her professional life. Chronic tardiness and forgetfulness were a norm in her on-set performances. In fact, her addiction is what led to her dismissal from her final film, Something's Got to Give. Then came what was expected. On August 5, 1962, Maryland's psychiatrist Dr. Ralph Greenson found Monroe, nude and clutching a telephone, lying lifeless in her bed. She was just 36 years old. Monroe was surrounded by a ton of prescription pills that were spread across her nightstand. Her death was recorded as a probable suicide, citing dangerously high levels of chloral hydrate in her system. Some authorities suggested her death may have been accidental. To date, her demise still remains a mystery. Unlike Monroe, the next actor on this list was an up-and-coming Hollywood sweetheart. Do you remember the Viper Room story? Here, you'll find the truth about it.
Speak. 3, 2, 1, and rolling.
River, I am so...
Number 13, River Phoenix. Born River Jude on August 23, 1970, River Phoenix's life was anything but ordinary. But like many child actors in Hollywood's golden age, River became a victim of drug abuse. River's acting journey started with a breakout role in the 1986 classic Stand By Me. Soon after that, he landed a lead role in a major film, My Own Private Idaho. But unlike his characters on screen, River was battling a serious drug addiction. By 1993, his struggles had become all too evident. River had become a regular at drug-fueled parties. His downward spiral was hard to ignore. In the weeks leading up to his death, River was filming Dark Blood in Utah and New Mexico. But on October 26, 1993, he returned to Los Angeles and went on a destructive drug binge. On the night of October 30th, River, his girlfriend, and his siblings were present at the Viper Room, a well-known Hollywood haunt. As the night ended, River suddenly collapsed. He passed away before the help could arrive. An autopsy later revealed a lethal cocktail of cocaine and heroin in his system, along with traces of other substances.
Might never be me.
Number 12, Margaret Sullivan. In 1933, Margaret Sullivan stepped foot in Hollywood. She was just 24 years old. But little did she know, by the age of 50, she'd be bidding goodbye to the world. Her debut in Only Yesterday marked the beginning of a journey that could have been remarkable. She cashed into the fame of her debut, but only for a little while. Throughout the 1930s and into the 1940s, Margaret stole scenes from the likes of Joan Crawford in The Shining Hour. She even went on to earn a well-deserved nomination for the Best Actress Academy Award for her role in Three Comrades. But shortly after that, Sullivan took her leave from big screen acting due to her deteriorating mental health. Her life became a mixture of depression, sickness, and drug use. With 3 failed marriages and deafness, Sullivan succumbed to her personal struggles. Her abuse of prescribed drugs spiraled out of control. Then, in 1955, she experienced a mental breakdown, which signaled the beginning of a downward spiral. With each passing year, her mental state continued to decline, and it was only a few years later that Margaret passed away due to barbiturate poisoning. On January 1, 1960, Sullivan's life met a premature end. Sullivan's final film appearance was in 1950 in No Sad Songs for Me. Now, hold on to your hearts because the next story is as well known as it is tragic.
Then you let Dent take your place. Even to a guy like me, that's cold.
Number 11. Heath Ledger. It was 2008 when the infamous actor who played Joker died of an accidental drug overdose. The world was in shock. Heath Ledger was only 28 years old and his career, it was at its prime. To his fans, it looked like he had it all. So what actually happened? Born on April 4, 1979 in Perth, Heath was destined to be a star. Did you know he was just 10 years old when he first started acting? Yep, and things only went uphill from there. Imagine being just 19 and already making waves in the streets of Los Angeles. That's exactly what Heath Ledger did. At just 26, he found himself in the running for an Academy Award for his performance in Brokeback Mountain. But his life behind the scenes wasn't all happy. It wasn't soon that reports surfaced of him battling drug abuse and struggling with insomnia. Yet, what he didn't know was that his preparation for Christopher Nolan's film The Dark Knight would wreck his mental health forever. In multiple interviews during the filming of The Dark Knight, Ledger dispelled he had been isolating himself to prepare for his portrayal of Joker. Despite Heath's family's warnings, he insisted he had everything under control, but he didn't. On January 22, 2008, Heath Ledger was found lifeless in his New York apartment. The New York City Medical Examiner's Office revealed that Heath Ledger's passing was a tragic accident caused by an overdose of prescription medications. It was a deadly mix of painkillers, anti-anxiety meds,
narcotic, and plenty of it. Hibernol lets you sleep and sleep and sleep.
Number 10. Chris Farley. A true Saturday night legend, Chris Farley was a man with terrific talent before the Hollywood industry brought him to his knees. Farley was the comedic powerhouse who lit up Saturday Night Live screens throughout the 90s. Who can forget his turns as the motivational speaker Matt Foley or his hilariously awkward Chippendales dance? But behind the scenes, Farley's larger-than-life persona hid a darker truth. Born on February 15, 1964, Chris was destined to make people laugh. Lorne Michaels, the Saturday Night Live star, recruited the rising star and brought him to Studio 8H. However, once Farley hit the SNL stage in 1990, fame also hit him hard. He turned to drugs and alcohol to cope with the pressure. In turn, he earned a reputation for his wild antics, and it was a reputation he couldn't escape. His iconic Chippendale skit alongside Patrick Swayze made him a household name, but Farley's struggles with addiction were no joke. By the late 90s, Farley's benders were becoming increasingly concerning. They started involving heroin and cocaine. Even after 17 rehab stints, Farley couldn't get his life back on track. Then, on December 18, 1997, after a 4-day drug binge, he was found lifeless in his apartment in Chicago. Chris Farley was just 33 years old when he passed away. Next up, we have an unbelievably ironic story. The unhappiness of a star who starred in a TV sitcom Happy Days will put you in shock.
I may not be happy, but honestly, I'll handle it. Thanks.
Let me tell you something.
Number 9. Erin Moran. Erin Moran burst into the scene of acting at the age of 5. Do you know her first acting gig? A commercial for First Federal Bank. From then onwards, it was a journey uphill for her until tragedies intervened. Throughout the 60s and 70s, Erin landed minor roles on big and small screens. But it wasn't until she was 12 that she got her big break. Moran stepped into the shoes of Joni Cunningham in the beloved TV sitcom Happy Days. And oh boy, did she capture hearts as the freckle-faced troublemaker. However, fame didn't come without a cost. When Happy Days and its ill-fated spin-off Joni Loves Chachi were canceled, Moran spiraled down the rabbit hole of drugs. By the mid-'80s, Moran was struggling with severe depression and a drug addiction. Even after attempts to revive her career, Moran failed. She was never able to reclaim her leading role status. Her appearances became minimal, and by 2008, she was making headlines for her struggles with depression, alcohol, and drugs. Then, the worst came. In 2012, reports emerged of her living conditions outside a Holiday Inn, and it was stated that she was motel hopping. Unfortunately, she had also been diagnosed with cancer by then. Moran's life became as bleak as her acting career. When she passed away in 2017, Moran's friends assumed that it was due to alcohol and hard drugs due to her notorious reputation. However, later on, an autopsy revealed complications from stage 4 cancer as the likely cause of her death. Prepare to be alarmed. You won't believe how much money your next favorite actor spent on drugs in his last months. Number 8. John Belushi. If you're into late-night comedy shows, John Belushi must be a name you're familiar with. But what you don't know is that this comedic legend has a complex story. Born on January 24, 1949 in Chicago, Belushi was the eldest son of Albanian immigrants. So, the question remains, how did he end up in Hollywood? Well, in 1972, Belushi packed his bags and headed to the Big Apple. There, he spent the next 3 years working on multiple projects for National Lampoon. But it was in 1975 that Belushi's star truly skyrocketed. He was cast to become one of the original members of Saturday Night Live. Suddenly, this funny guy from Chicago became a household name. After this stint, he landed roles in hit films like the 1980 blockbuster The Blues Brothers. However, as the story goes, fame wasn't all sunshine and rainbows for Belushi. The pressure started building. John Belushi turned to what every rising actor of Hollywood's golden age turned to: drugs. But it wasn't until the filming of The Blues Brothers that Belushi's drug use reached alarming levels. As his drug habit escalated, Belushi's behavior became increasingly unsteady. Did you know he spent $2,500 a week on drugs in his final months? Belushi's life was cut short on March 5, 1982. The reason was haunting. John was injected with a lethal combination of cocaine and heroin by his drug dealer Kathy Smith in Los Angeles. Kathy was later indicted when he confessed to ending Belushi's life and served several years in jail.
You've got to give me a chance.
But I didn't have a chance.
It was Halliday. Believe me, it was Halliday. He made me steal a bill of sale.
Number 7. Lynn Baggett. There's one waitress who still stands out in the diner scene of Mildred Pierce in 1945. Lynn Baggett, a tall, graceful figure gliding across the screen. Spotted at just 19 while working in a Texas department store, Lynn was on a 3-year contract with Warner Brothers. When her Warner Brothers contract ended without renewal, Lynn made a mistake. She fell for Sam Spiegel, an up-and-coming movie producer despite their 20-year age gap. It didn't help that Spiegel was renowned for his lavish parties rather than his film credits at the time. But Lynn saw in him a chance to climb the ladder of success. However, Hollywood's glamorous life couldn't mask Lynn's struggles. Her career hit a roadblock too soon, despite securing a few speaking roles. It's true that Spiegel didn't help her achieve success, however, he also didn't leave her with good habits. Lynn had developed a drug and alcohol addiction. Naturally, the studios stopped casting Lynn due to her alcohol and drug abuse. With her career now in the ditch, Lynn's reckless behavior didn't help her cause. In 1954, Lynn's personal and professional troubles reached a pinnacle. She survived a drug overdose and became a direct cause of a fatal accident that left her partially paralyzed. The accident also ended the lives of 2 young people. For Lynn, there was no coming back from this. Finally, in 1959, at the age of 36, Lynn took her life. The cause of death was an acute barbiturate intoxication. Number 6. Gene Eagles. Born on June 26, 1890 in the heart of Kansas City, Gene Eagles grew up with a carpenter father and 5 siblings. However, her life took a twist when in 1905 she landed a gig with the Dubinsky Brothers Traveling Theater show. While on the road, she fell in love with Morris Dubinsky. But after the death of her infant son, Jean lost control of her life. And it wasn't until soon that she found herself seeking solace in other things. By 1911, she was divorced and in the center of New York City. Jean's talent shone on Broadway. She danced in the Ziegfeld Follies and graced the stage in several plays. Then, in 1913, Jean's silver screen debut came in. She starred in Ace of Hearts, which marked the start of a promising film career. Yet, behind her cinematic appearance, Jean was fighting the demons of addiction. She found herself in the grips of drugs and alcohol. Despite her talent, Jean's reputation for being difficult to work with tarnished her prospects. Even as she found love and wedded Edward Coy, a stockbroker, her career faced setbacks. As a last tribute to her career, she starred in The Letter in 1929. It was the role that earned her a posthumous Academy Award nomination. But it wasn't soon that Jean's life was cut short on October 3, 1929, at just 39 years old. The cause of her death was revealed to be a lethal cocktail of heroin, chloral hydrate, and alcohol. Hollywood lost another promising, talented star. Now it's time for the next actor, an actor whose potential shone bright since he was only 2 years old. Can you imagine?
Drugs into the place.
No, I did not.
Unbeknownst.
No, I did not.
Unbeknownst.
No, I did not.
Number 5. Jeff Conaway. Success and struggle go hand in hand, especially in Hollywood. And Jeff Conaway's story is just that. Did you know that he started acting at the age of 2? Yep. Stepping onto the Broadway stage at the age of 2, he kicked off a career that would span decades. But you might remember him as Kenickie in the movie version of Grease. But what you don't know is that he originally played Danny Zuko on Broadway. Yep, he gave up the lead role to John Travolta for the big screen. However, it was during his time on Broadway that Conaway's troubles started appearing. He suffered from an injury that led to a reliance on painkillers, and what followed was a harrowing tale of full-blown addiction. From 1978 to 1981, Conaway's big break on the small screen came with the hit sitcom Taxi. He portrayed the lovable but troubled Bobby Wheeler. In fact, he even received a Golden Globe nomination for his performance. But all the acclaims weren't enough to hide the grim reality. Conaway's battle with addiction was raging. It has been reported that there were times when he was too high to perform. The result was a tarnished reputation and a failing career. His struggles with addiction were brought into the spotlight when he joined Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew. But unfortunately, he could never recover. At the age of 60, in 2011, he was found dead in his apartment. The cause of death was severe pneumonia and sepsis, likely due to years of substance abuse.
He's gonna be a rebel till the Wild West is tame.
Number 4. Nick Adams. Fame, friendship, and ultimately, tragedy. Nick Adams was a bright star that burned out too quickly. Born on July 10, 1931 in Pennsylvania, Nick Adams had big dreams from a young age. In the late 1950s, he received his breakthrough with the hit TV series The Rebel. This catapulted him to fame and earned him a spot in Hollywood's spotlight. Did you know he actually became good friends with icons like Marlon Brando and James Dean? Yet, none of this was enough to keep him away from the lucrative life of drug addiction. As the 1960s rolled on, Nick's career hit a rough patch. Quality roles dried up and he found himself in Japan, where he starred in a string of sci-fi and horror flicks. But despite his efforts to revive his career, he faced disappointment after disappointment. Then, on February 7, 1968, something happened that not many foresaw. Nick Adams was discovered lifeless in his Beverly Hills home at just 36 years old. His lawyer found his body fully clothed and surrounded by prescription drug bottles. The coroner's report initially left more questions than answers, but an autopsy revealed the grim truth. Nick had died due to a fatal drug overdose at the age of 36. Do you remember the adorable blonde with pigtails Buffy on Family Affair? Well, her story is that of another actor who started too early and burned out as quickly. Number 3. Anissa Jones. Born on March 11, 1958 in Indiana, Anissa kicked off her acting career at the age of 8. She lit up the screen as Buffy alongside her TV siblings and Uncle Bill. But it wasn't until the show's cancellation in 1971 that Anissa's career fizzled out. Surprisingly, Anissa wanted to break free from her image as sweet, innocent Buffy, yet it didn't prove to be an easy battle. Despite her efforts to transition to the big screen, Jones struggled. Even auditions for edgier roles like Regan McNeil in The Exorcist felt like a mismatch with her innocent on-screen persona. With her dreams of a successful acting career slipping away, Jones turned away from Hollywood. But she also turned towards a different crowd. She found herself among friends outside the industry, and those friends were all caught up in drug use. And that's what proved to be her undoing. On August 28, 1976, at just 18 years old, Jones's life came to an end. The reason? A fatal overdose at a party in Oceanside, California.
Through the sycamores, the candlelights are gleaming.
Number 2. Scotty Beckett. Yep, Scotty Beckett was the infamous Rascal. Born in 1929, Scotty started his acting journey at the age of 3. As obvious, he made his as one of our gang in The Little Rascals. A minute later, Hollywood quickly took notice, and as quickly he became one of the industry's most beloved child stars. But Scotty's transition into adulthood was marred by battles with substance addiction and depression. Despite his early success, his reliance on drugs and alcohol didn't earn him a good word. His performance quality decreased, as well as his reliability as an actor. In his teenage years, Scotty's nightlife and partying lifestyle began to overshadow his acting career. He did land good roles in films like The Jolson Story and A Date with Judy. However, his personal life seemed to take center stage. His downward spiral continued through the 1950s. He was arrested for drunk driving on multiple occasions, and it didn't help that a near-fatal crash left him severely injured. In an attempt to revive his career, he landed roles in sci-fi shows like Rocky Jones and Space Ranger, but Scotty struggled to reclaim his former glory. By the late 1960s, Scotty's life had spiraled out of control. His involvement in a Hollywood nursing home and a suspected drug deal gone wrong ultimately led to his tragic demise. On May 8, 1968, Scotty Beckett passed away from a fatal overdose of barbiturates at the age of 38. Next up, we have the story of the son of Hollywood royalty, Kirk Douglas. But unlike his father, Eric's story isn't all lights and laughter.
To do Spartacus. Right. My father's been an independent producer before the term independent producer ever existed.
Number 1. Eric Douglas. This handsome young man was born on June 21, 1958 in Los Angeles. He was the son of Kirk Douglas, a famous Hollywood actor. But what you don't know is that he was also a half-brother to Michael Douglas, a famous Hollywood producer. Now, you'd think that Eric's journey in the entertainment industry would be smooth sailing. But it was far from that. You might have caught him in a handful of TV shows and movies like Delta Force 3. Apart from that, his filmography isn't exactly bursting at the seams. With just 9 film credits to his name, his career path was not so bright. So as every aspiring actor who can't break it, in the early 90s, Eric bid farewell to acting. Guess what he took up next? Comedy. Little did he know that his drinking habits would get him booed off the stage on his first act. After that, in the mid-90s, he made headlines for all the wrong reasons. He was facing drug charges after an undercover police bust. And hey, how can we forget the time he spent a night in jail? He was involved in an alleged drunken driving escapade. Struggling with the weight of his famous family's legacy, Eric battled demons of addiction. In 1999, Eric faced a near-death experience when he slipped into an 8-day coma due to drugs. His troubles followed him into the 2000s. He was kicked out of his hotel room in North Carolina due to his getting into a fight. It was the last of Eric Douglas the world witnessed until 2004. At the age of 24, Eric Douglas's story came to a tragic end due to an accidental drug overdose. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and check out our other videos for more content just like this.